All right, what is going on, guys? My name is Ethan J. We are back with another video. This video is going to be a little bit more of a controversial video. It's going to be controversial. There's going to be a lot of thoughts to this, and I just want to start this by saying this now. I'm not an expert on the topic that we're discussing, but nonetheless, I do want to discuss it. Growing up in school, I've graduated from high school far past the time at the age of that I am now. It's been well over 10 years. We are taught in high school the story of his story, right? His story, a narrative that we are told of the victors that have conquered lands and have created the landscape that we see today. However, we are not really told the farthest depths of history, and it takes research on your own to really learn a little bit more about history. We are taught, at least, from the Canadian rhetoric, that the French, the British, and the Irish came here and conquered land, and they found a land that was unconquerable, and they conquered it from the savages that stayed here, and they did miracles. But is that really history? Is that really the truth, or is that just one narrative from one group who still happen to maintain position of power today? Let's take a look at the White House, or not even the White House, the House of Commons here in Canada. And let's look at all the faces and what race and background they come from. Now, from the photo here, am I really gonna believe that this narrative is true? I could talk to you about the Aboriginals all day. I've done essays on them. I've done stories on them. I very much ride and stand for my Aboriginal brothers and sisters, even though I'm not Aboriginal. I believe in their history. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a very important topic. I'm going to talk to you about 10 heroes of the faith, 10 individuals who aren't really talked about and aren't really discussed in modern day high school. These heroes were historical figures who had a very unique perspective and position and had a very unique outlook on the way that they lived their life. Let's start off with Socrates. Socrates, 399 BC. And guys, if you guys are seeing me look down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. I wish I had my actual notes today, but unfortunately I do not. So I'm going to be looking down at my notes here. He employed the Socratic method to publicly question Athenian authorities, opposing the ignorance of ruling politicians and the sophisticates. He believed true wisdom begins with admitting one's own ignorance, and sought to foster intellectual virtue and critical thinking over blind obedience. Unfortunately, Socrates was killed, formally executed by drinking hemlock on charges of corrupting the youth and impiety. The state viewed his relentless questioning as an existential threat to democratic stability post-Peloponnesian War. The second hero on this list, and I would argue probably the greatest one, without a doubt, Jesus Christ. What he did, he preached a message of the kingdom of God and transcending imperial authority. He challenged the corruption of the local religious elite, the Sanhedrin, and gathered a massive loyal following among the marginalized. Driven by a theological mandate to reform spiritual practice, uplifting the poor, and fulfilling messianic prophecy. He was killed, sentenced to crucifixion by Roman prefect Pontius Pilate, under pressure from religious leaders, not even from his own disdain. He was killed by his own people, because of a massive posed threat that he causing civil unrest against Roman imperial rule and the local religious status quo. Joan of Arc, 1431. Nobody can tell me that women are not great, because we've seen that throughout history. I'm not saying all women, but I am saying women. What she did: led French armies to pivotal victories against the English during the 100 Years' War, claiming direct divine guidance from saints. She was intensely devoted and fiercely nationalistic, believing she was divinely chosen to expel the English and see Charles V crowned. Unfortunately, she was captured by Burgundian allies of England and burned at the stake by an ecclesiastical court on trumped charges of heresy and cross-dressing. Her execution was a political necessity to delegitimize King Charles' crown by framing his military savior as a witch. Wow. We're going to move into number 4 on this list. And we're going to talk a little bit about the theme that I'm seeing here with these individuals. And I want to ask you a question. So far on this list, have any of these heroes or leaders or whatever you want to claim them, have they ever been taught to you before in public school? I want you to think about that for a second. Mahatma Gandhi led India's non-violent independence movement against British colonial rule and adamantly advocated for religious pluralism, unity, and peace between Hindus and Muslims post-partition. He believed in the absolute power of truth and non-violence to achieve both political freedom and moral reformation. Shot by Nathuram Godse, a militant Hindu nationalist, Godse killed him because he believed Gandhi's tolerant stance towards Muslims and Pakistanis betrayed the vision by a pure Hindu India. Interesting. This is a side note. If your faith causes you to kill another person in order for that faith to be justified, do you really have a true faith? That's something to really ponder. But I digress. One of the greats, John F. Kennedy, 1963. Navigated intense Cold War flashpoints, but increasingly clashed with his own military-industrial complex, signed with a limited nuclear test ban treaty with the USSR, and expressed deep skepticism regarding the unilateral power of intelligence agencies like the CIA. Aimed to de-escalate global nuclear tension, reforming domestic civil rights, and asserting firm executive control over autonomous government agencies. Unfortunately, he was killed in Dallas, Texas, officially pinned on lone gunman Lee Harvey Oswald. The killing has faced decades of intense skepticism from historians who point out the institutional elements with his deep state, viewed his foreign policies shifts as soft on communism and dangerous to defense interests. So he questioned his own internal rhetoric and company, and that cost him something. Malcolm X, 1965. Campaigned black civil determination and human rights. After breaking with the Nation of Islam and converting to Sunni Islam, he broadened his message to global anti-imperialism and international civil rights coalition. He sought uncompromising systemic justice and liberation of black Americans, evolving his strategy from racial separatism to global human rights solidarity. Assassinated by members of the Nation of Islam while speaking in New York. While NOI members pulled the triggers, declassified documents and modern investigations revealed the FBI's COINTELPRO actively stoked deadly friction and security gaps to eliminate him as a powerful, unifying leader. Again, killed from the very people that he was living amongst. Martin Luther King Jr., 1968, and this is number 7 on the list. Orchestrated the civil rights movement through nonviolent resistance. Critical in his last few years, expanding his focus to the Poor People's Campaign and fiercely condemning the Vietnam War. Uniting racial justice with anti-militarism and economic restructuring. Driven by Christian ethics and radical democratic ideals, he realized that the civil rights legislation was hollow without ending systematic poverty and imperial warfare. Shot by James Earl Ray in Memphis, King's shift from domestic discretion to attacking broader economic and military pillars of the United States made him an intolerable threat to federal agents like the FBI, which had bugged and harassed him for years. Guys, I just want you to know something. I'm using an AI that is giving me data that is publicly available. If you're following the train of thought that I'm following, it is open information that the CIA and the FBI is actively killing members and people of their own society just because they're outspoken and have a stance on standing up for something. If you find that interesting, like I do, that there is an internal hand that is killing people just because they happen to have a stance on something, I think you're following the narrative that I'm following. Number 8, Alexandria of Hypatia, a brilliant pagan philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer in Alexandria who advised top political figures and taught religious tolerance during a time of intense Christian triumphalism. Committed to the preservation of classic science, Neoplatonic philosophy, and open rational discourse. Unfortunately, she was brutally murdered and dismembered by a mob of Christian zealots, the Parabellani. She was targeted because her political influence over the Roman prefect Ortis stood in the way of the local bishop Cyril's goal to consolidate absolute religious control. Local bishop Cyril's goal to consolidate absolute religious control over the city. A lot of people want to claim that Christians are, at the core of a lot of killing. Unfortunately, that's not Christianity. That's a name that they associate with. But that's not Christianity. If you know what Christianity is, that's not Christianity. Thomas Sankar, this is number 9 on the list, served as a Marxist, anti-imperialist president of Burkina Faso. He launched a massive program for vaccinations, land redistribution, and women's rights, while proudly refusing foreign aid and defying Western financial institutions like the IMF, probably associated with our juice friends. He aimed to eradicate the lingering chains of French neocolonialism and make it his nation completely self-sufficient. Assassinated in a coup led by his former associate Blaise Compaoré, the coup was heavily backed by foreign imperial interests, specifically France, that could not only allow successful model of an African self-reliance to challenge their economic hegemony. Interesting. And lastly on this list, Fred Hampton, 1969. Deputy chairman of the Black Panther Party in Illinois, he successfully brokered peace between rival street gangs and founded the Rainbow Coalition, a patent multi-racial alliance of working-class groups, Black Panthers, Young Patriots, and the Young Lords. He recognized that the revolution change required dismantling racial barriers to build unified class-conscious front against systematic oppression. Shot and killed in his bed during a pre-dawn raid by Chicago police and the FBI. He was explicitly targeted under the FBI's COINTELPRO directive to prevent the rise of a unified leader capable of electrifying a cross-racial movement. So not only will your own government come and try to kill you once you stand for something, but they have agendas and programs in place that are tracking every single person who has this type of power or influence. Isn't that interesting? Now I'm gonna do a very unique thing in this video. It's probably something that you haven't seen in a long time. I'm gonna make a correlative jump. So the way that my mind works is I like to connect theories to theories, right? And that might not be good for academia, but it'll be good for this video. So in the news, we've seen a very recent disappearance. In the recent years, a highly publicized, deep, unsettling pattern has emerged in national headlines involving roughly 10 to 12 U.S. scientists and defense personnel linked to highly sensitive sectors, specifically nuclear energy, aerospace, advanced materials, and fusion research. These collective incidences around elite defense corridors like Pasadena, California, Los Angeles, Los Alamos, New Mexico has triggered intense media scrutiny, congressional inquiries, and an active holistic review by federal law enforcement to determine if foreign espionage or internal security breaches are at play. This list of notable individuals and exactly what they were working on is listed below. So for the sake of this video, I'm not going to list out exactly every single name here. It's a long list, and I'm going to save it for another video. But I will say this. Each one of these individuals, as I'm looking at their deaths, died a very tragic, unfortunate death. Fatally shot in his home by a former acquaintance. Fatally shot outside his home in a carjacking incident. Disappeared mysteriously from his home with his revolver. Currently still missing. Disappeared suddenly while hiking on a mountain just a few feet away from a companion. Body unfound. Passed away at age 59. Family cited a chronic health condition, but lack of intentional or initial public details fueled early speculation. Died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, investigated and ruled as a suicide by local police. Yeah. Disappeared from a roadside, leaving behind factory reset devices. Police say it may be voluntary due to personal stress. Disappeared on foot while carrying a handgun. These individuals all have very unique government clearances. And what I find so funny about the correlation between these individuals and the heroes that I've talked about before, the historical heroes, it almost seems like there is an agenda within an agenda to raise people in positions of power just for them to maintain a cog in a wheel. But the minute that you decide, the minute that you decide to say, hey, I don't really agree with what's going on here, and you have clearance, or you spark encouragement in another generation, or you spark resilience away from the system. If you think of Jesus, if you think of Socrates, you get ostracized. Now, a lot of people are going to say today, oh, no, Ethan, this is just you're reaching really far here, man. At the end of the day, bro, come on, man. Like, this is just a theory. And yeah, it's just a theory. I'm just talking. But is there a connection? I truly believe that the further you go down the realm of truth seeking and the realm of exposing the narratives that we see in the world today, that you will face opposition. And now my question for you is, as we look at the greats, the Jesuses, the Joan of Arcs, and whoever else, the Mahatma Gandhis, and we see the injustices that are happening in the world today, right? Like something like this. The question I ask for you is, where are you going to stand in a world where your leaders and your government are actively killing innocent people because they're willing to stand and fight against difficult oppression? Where will you stand is my question. And do you see the pattern? Guys, my name is Ethan J. We talk about a lot of difficult topics on this channel. And I want to tell you this right now, that a disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I just love talking about topics that bring me interest. If you have something to add to this type of content, and if this is the video that goes viral, I would love to hear your story and your take. I want to give a heartfelt rest in peace to every soul that was brutally murdered for fighting for something that they believed in, who believed in not killing, not murdering, but fighting for freedom, for rights, to not be a slave or a cog in the wheel. And in a time like today, that seems like a rebellious act. Take care.